Hi, welcome back. This is part 3 and the last of the instalments of how I'm going to be making my Mitre saw station. If you haven't already seen part 1 and 2, please click on the box up above which will take you directly to these videos. Today I'm going to be starting to make the doors for the right and left cabinet and also the drawers which are going to be situated in the cabinet at the end, and the drawers which are going to be in the actual shelf itself. Now I've already measured out for the doors. It's a nice sunny day, we're going to go outside and cut up some wood. I start by making the doors. As I said, I already measured for this, and using the free online panel cutting software I easily worked out the best cuts for the size of the MDF that I had. I am rough cutting the pieces as each one of these cuts has 2 doors within them. I just move them inside while I finish all the cuts. If you haven't already got one, I highly recommend these large T-squares. They are a great piece of kit and help give you that 90-degree perfect line every time. I bought this one on eBay for around £15. Once all the initial cuts are completed, I bring them back outside to cut them to their final size. You can do this on the table saw, but it's just a lot easier seeing how I have the plunge saw all set up. After cutting the 4 panels to make up the doors, I fitted 2. Now it's been a while since I hung any doors and used the hinges, so I wanted to have a test run just to make sure I still knew how to do it. Now as you can see, these doors open and close nicely and they meet in the middle and they've got a nice gap down them. Now these hinges that I'm using are Hayfel, I think that's how you pronounce it, and it's a cabinet hinge. I use a 35mm Forstner bit to make the hole for the main cabinet door and a 6mm normal woodworking bit to make the hole for the screws to go in on the actual cabinet itself. As you've probably seen on other videos, the cabinet hinges that I'm using here are totally adjustable. You can adjust them so they come out and they can pivot as well, so you can make them meet in the middle. Now that these are in place, we're going to move on now and fit in the next 2 doors. To lay out the hinge, I use a combination square to measure in 22mm from the outer edge. After this, I measure in 70mm and mark where the 2 lines meet. As I said, I am using a 35mm Forstner bit for the recess. To make sure the hinge sits in square to the piece, I use a speed square, as I had this to hand. Doing this helps the hinge sit properly within the cabinet. I use self-centering bits to drill the screws, but this again isn't at all necessary, it's just I have them to hand. Now I'm sure that a lot of people are going to say that's not the correct way of how to hang the door, but I like it and it's nice and quick and simple. So this is my technique. I put both of these onto the hinge. These parts are the bits that go into the cabinet. Sliding together like that. Push it all the way. Tightening it down. Again, doing the same for the top. If you take these screws out, these are the grub screws that connect it to the cabinet. I then take the cabinet door and I make a mark in the centre. There and there. Drill the holes for the grub screws. Now that those holes are drilled, put the cabinet back into place, put in the 2 grub screws. Now that they're tight, I can move on and a drill for the next holes at the top. Now, as I've said, these hinges are fully adjustable, so what we're going to do is just move it slightly out away from the cabinet. That's why I always put the cabinet part as close to the actual hinge as possible, so then we can move it away. And there's one door. I've made the doors and they've been fitted into place. Now, I thought they looked rather plain, just as they were, so what I've done is I've run a V-bit in the router and I've made these grooves here. It's to make it look a bit of like a shaker style door front. Now, I've done two just to test that they go okay. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to do the other two. Once they're done, I'm going to retake these off and run a quarter round bit to just soften off all the sides. Here I'm using my Katsu 1/4 inch router for this process. I've had it for a few months now and I find it an absolute great piece of kit. The price was only $39.99 and has similar specifications to a make with a similar colour. All my other router bits are 1/2 inch, but I had these lying around from one of the first ever routers I purchased all 10 years ago. The bits aren't fantastic, but for these small jobs they are great. I used the supplied fence guide for the first time during this process, and although it's not 100% stable in my personal opinion, it still did a great job and didn't fully come apart on me. With the doors now finished and rehung, I'm moving on to the drawers, which will go into the units at the far end of the Mitre station. I measured them off screen, and with a quick diagram which I follow, I make one drawer to test before I batch out the remaining 3. The drawers are a simple yet effective design. I cut out all parts, then moved back to the table saw to cut a rebate to accommodate the front and rear pieces. The rebate is 18mm across and 9mm deep. At this time I don't cut for the bottom as I want to make sure that the drawers fit well within the cabinet and all run smoothly. I am using 400mm steel drawer runners. These come in 2 parts. The first part attaches to the underside of the drawer and the second attached to the cabinet. These aren't going to be as good as the bearing runners, but these are incredibly cheap and very strong. The angle was very awkward to get a good camera angle here, so apologies. I started off the first runner using an offcut of 6mm to raise it off the bottom of the cabinet. The second runner will then go above this with another spacing, and so on. The drawers being all fitted into place, I do come back later on and cut these down as they are just too tall for what I wanted. Better to cut over and take off than cut under and be stuck with a mistake. I'm moving back to framing now. I ran out of 2x1 material, so I had some square stock 2x4 which I then milled down to get the size I wanted. This in fact worked out a lot better as I needed to cut more than the 18mm square pieces for the lower undershelf cabinet, so it finished flush with the above shelf. This will be explained later. I'm not using any glue again as I don't really see a need to. I don't believe the shelf will see a lot of hard use over its lifetime, and with many of the other items I've built face frames for the shed, I've yet to have one that has come apart. This was the pass I was explaining about. I don't know what I was playing at when I installed the lower cabinet, but it was inset from the shelf by around 7mm. Not a great problem, but I ideally wanted this all to be flush, so this piece of trim was cut at 25mm rather than 18. I'm now starting to cut all the drawers to receive their bottoms. I start cutting my dado 12mm from the bottom of the drawer. The stock I use for the bottom is 12mm MDF, so I move the fence over after each pass to get the perfect fit. I keep checking against a spare piece to make sure I have the perfect size. With these all completed, I lay out the pieces and assemble. The drawers all went together great and they were extremely solid. Right, I'm now moving on to the drawers for the shelf. Like everything else, I made a quick sketch of what I needed, including all the measurements and cut layouts. When each cut is made, I mark them up so I know exactly which piece is which. I made a quick and simple jig to hold the pieces 90 degrees to one another while I fixed them together. I started using screws but found with such a narrow piece of wood it broke the fibres. I ended up using 50mm brads to attach the rest, and this worked out great. The bottoms are all 3mm plywood. The plywood's cut to rough size, nailed on, and then using a flush cut bit in the router cut to size. Doing it this way allowed me to make sure that the drawers were 100% square, even if my piece of wood wasn't. With the drawers all looking amazing, they need some amazing looking drawer fronts. I wanted the look of one whole piece. I cut the front and using a nail gun I fixed them temporarily into place. I attached them permanently with 30mm screws. I continue doing this to all the other drawers. So now that we've finished all the drawers, I've put a profile in these as well. I didn't film this, it's exactly the same as what I've done with the doors. So it's just the V-channel bit in the 1/4 inch router and then the round over piece as well, just to finish it off. Now as I've said, these drawers, I've done them so they're butted up against each other. So when you look along, it is all flush with the worktop. I'm really happy with these. So what I'm going to do is fill them up just to clear a bit of space around the shop and then move on to the drawers at the end. So now I'm going back to the cupboards which I made earlier. I cut to size and placed 12mm bottoms in these the exact same way as I did the others. So now I will be putting on all the fronts. I want everything to be flush and butt up to one another. I start by cutting each panel slightly oversized and then using the wall as a guide I run my pencil along to give me a line, which I then cut so it fits perfectly. They were finished off to match everything else. I want to make a drawer that's going to be going under these cupboards as I've explained in previous videos. what I'm going to be using are these 350 full extension ball bearing drawer slides. They're made by Smith & Lock. Picked them up from Screwfix, only about £4 each. Top bargain. So I'm going to be using these. I've already measured the thickness of both of them together, and that's 22mm. Now I've done a quick design on here. So yeah, as that handsome man just explained, I'm making yet more drawers. They are made the same way, and I use my really expensive jig to make sure everything is fitted together square. When I fit the drawer slides, I use my large square, and using the upper cupboard as a reference, I hold the drawer slide in place. On the drawers itself, I use my combination square to measure approximately halfway down one side, and using the adjustment holes on the side, I fix it into place. I turn the drawer around and do this again on the other side. And now just to push it into place. And it's finished. Or should I say, I've still got a few things to do. Mostly I need to put a door on this cupboard here, just to make sure that there's no dust going into my whetstone. And also as well, I need to turn some knobs to go on all the doors and the drawers. I really do hope that you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please do click the thumbs up button, and also as well, why don't you click the subscribe button so you always get notifications when I upload a new video. I do have some really good big projects coming up in the pipeline, so do stay tuned. Until next time, I'll see you soon.